Welcome to Production Value Matters, the business event podcast, brought to you by Byrne Production Services. Here, we explore the different ways business events can bring value to your organization, the latest technological advances in the event space, as well as providing you with actionable strategies to make a business event a success. Let's create an exceptional event experience.
Welcome to another episode of Production Value Matters, the business events podcast. I'm very excited to have Jennifer D. Collins on the show today, the founder and longtime president and CEO of JDC Events. In 2018, she published the fantastic Events Spark Change book, and she's also one of the masterminds behind Fuse, with their intensive workshop events that bring together event organizers from across the world. Welcome to the show, Jennifer. How are you today?
I am fabulous, and thank you so much. I am happy to be here. Excited.
Thank you. So how did you get to where you are today? And can you talk me a little bit through the beginning of your career? Is it true that you started in family reunions?
I did. So I always had an affinity for planning events because of the family reunions. And for my family, that is. So we did not do that for others. It was just a hobby, something that I enjoyed and liked to do. And so that's really where I started out. And then, of course, I went to college. And when I was at college, I went to the American University in Washington, D.C. I was planning events there as well. And through my internships, my degree was in public communication or public relations. And so many of the internships that I had were specifically related to PR. And then, of course, events are a form of PR. So I was planning events, and I was doing it on campus as well as the president of the Public Relations Student Society of America. So I was getting lots of different exposure to events, and I decided that I liked it, and I liked it a lot. And I think what I really most enjoyed from it was the results of the events. You know, for my family reunions, it was the bonding, the connection, the engagement, how it made people feel. And so that was sort of the rush and why I wanted to continue to do it. And then fast forward, I started my company, JDC Events. Shortly after I graduated, I did it part-time for about 4 years. And then I went full-time 2 weeks before September 11th terrorist attacks happened. And so that was a very difficult time. The one client that helped me to leave my last job to start the company, they decided that it wasn't right to hold the event that they were doing at that time, which is an incentive program. And so the mood of the country just wasn't there. And so it was hard to rebuild those next several years. But one of the ways that we did it was by going after government contracts. You know, we're based here, as I mentioned, in the Washington, D.C. area, and that's the largest employer. So we managed events on behalf of the government as well as corporations and nonprofits. And so that really helped us to transform and grow and continue to do what we do today.
Absolutely. You know, we have that in common because I started this company that I currently run 2 or 3 months before the pandemic hit.
Yes.
So in retrospect, was perfect timing is the joke that I always like to say.
Right,
But
right.
we certainly, and I think the industry as a whole had a lot of rebuilding in the same fashion over the last couple of years. So
Agreed.
I feel that pain.
And it's continuing to recalibrate, as you probably well know.
So, you know, we talked about this in our pre-call about the community principles in event planning. So how do you start an event with those community principles in mind? And is there a specific example of that approach that's sort of transformed an event's outcome and plan in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think how people need to think is, what I often say to people is, I'm a hiker. I give them an example. I'm a hiker. I love hiking. I enjoy it. And so I'm in hiking groups. And so when I'm going on a hike, if it's not in a group, or even if it is in a group, I want to know about the terrain. I want to know where's the parking. I want to know if it's really a 2-mile hike that ends up being 8 miles, or is it a steep incline or whatever. I want to know specific details related to the hike. So I go to my trusted group to tell me that. And when we're on the hike together, we all have that similar bond of why we are there. The hiking, the woods is just our oxygen. We love it. That's our community. And so when you're managing events, that's something you need to think about in the sense of, how can you build those type of principles, that feeling where people just go to that trusted group and organization because they know the information they're going to get from it. They love the people that are there, that pour into them, that are, those that are, they have meaningful engagements with. That's what you're trying to do and build with your events. And so that's why the community building is so very important, because it's not about you. It's about the people. It's about the audience. What's their perspectives? What are their values? What is it that they want? How do they need to interact? How do they need to engage with one another? So when you think about it in a practical context of how you spend your time outside of work, there's something most often, I should say, that people enjoy doing that brings them back year after year or week after week or day after day, depending upon whatever it is that they're engaged in. That's how you want to build your events, so that they are strong, that they're engaged, the people that are coming. And then you're an organization, I'm assuming, people that would be working on behalf of companies and events, or companies and other organizations, they need to be profitable. And so that helps to strengthen the return, because the people are engaged and they just have to come because they know that they're going to get some sort of value there.
And so do you have a specific example of where that alignment of the event's purpose with that community value has significantly changed the outcome or enhanced it?
I'll give you an example of an organization that we work on behalf of. And they are an organization that they deal with exporting. And the individuals or the attendees that come to this particular conference are companies. And so they're doing business and learning how to do business to export. When registration opens, and it's just recent that this happened, the organization was a little slow in pulling together the details. So the speakers and the exact topics and those sorts of things. But registration opened anyway because it had to. But what happened is that there was a very solid clip in the sense of people were registering, and then they went to sellout, basically waitlisting. And it happened very quickly. There were no speakers. There were no, strong topics or names, at least, that people knew what was going to happen there, but they were coming anyway. It's an international conference, and it usually brings probably about over 1,000 people. And I think this time it's probably closer to maybe 1,300 or so that actually came. And I say this, I love this example because it speaks to the power of what this organization delivers on behalf of the people that come. What do they get? They get meaningful engagements. They have roundtables. They get a lot of FaceTime with each other. They get FaceTime with the organization. There are just so many different things that they walk away with that's powerful to them and meaningful to them, that they would register for something where they don't know yet what is exactly going to be there, but they know what they've gotten in the past and the value that it has brought. So they're just going to come because of it. So it's possible for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I like that example, and let's say that is a little bit of a rarity, because I think every person, every planner, and every organizer listening to that is like, well, could I not do all my speaker announcements and then just get everybody registered? That would be
I don't recommend. Let me just say, I don't recommend that. Yeah. But it just so happens that's what happened.
So then. Were you in a position where you could then, because you had all these registrants, you could go to them to sort of groundswell the programming and from the community? Was the community able to contribute to that planning process?
They do have feedback that they receive from their community, yes. So that's why they do know, and they do have the data. And this has been an organization that has been in existence for a long time, and their conferences have come and gone and grown. But it is the flagship of this organization. So they do have the data to understand what the personas are, if you will, and what they need, what they tend to like, and where the values are in the sense of how they make their decisions. So absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you strategize that engagement in a virtual or hybrid event format, to build that community and so that they feel integrated with the value in the physical space?
Yeah, it's interesting because we all, of course, remember coming off of this pandemic and the challenges that we face with that. I believe that the biggest part of ensuring that engagement, if you are in a virtual setting or even a hybrid setting, is through the personalization for one, But number two is that you have to bring them in some way, shape, or form. So, if you're just live streaming, they're going to be multitasking. But if there is a way where you have polled them throughout the presentation, or you've asked them to come in a certain way, meaning the topics that you're interested in talking about with the people that you're interested in talking to. So that takes some planning on your end, depending upon what type of an event that it is. But the point is really to bring some sort of connection to the stage so that people know that they're coming, yes, but they're also truly participating in it. Even though it is virtual, they are participating in it. So it's maybe a different way that you present the presentations as well. It's not just a chat feature or something, because people are still multitasking. It's really helping them to be a part of the process throughout the actual production of whatever that might be. It takes time, and it does take some resources, as we, of course, all found out and experienced during the pandemic. But it is something that can be effective, because live events in the virtual world, they're not mutually exclusive. They're not supposed to cancel each other out. They never were. They're tools to be used in a certain way. So it's a matter of how to harness that tool to make it work best for what you need it to at any given time. So I do think virtually it still can be effective, whether they're webinars or whether there's certain types of meetings. We notice within the government space that they have found something that it's just been discovered that's really useful to them in that sense. So there still are sectors that I think really are focusing on that still in their business work. But I just think it needs to be thought through as to how that engagement happens.
And so are there particular tools that you found effective in building community for those events? And, you mentioned just a second ago about like polling and chat and all those things on virtual and hybrid events. But is there specific tools that you're using to build that community sense in your events?
Well, those particular items that I just mentioned really are the mainstay. We're finding that many of our events are not including that as much anymore. Some are still doing it. But so from a tools perspective, something else that might be considered are when you're matchmaking. That's a good example. I do see a lot of that, and we have done that. So, and that would be the majority of often some of the events that are incorporating into their particular virtual, is because of the fact of there's engagement or roundtables. I mean, I know that's not really a tool per se, in terms of technology, but it is a tool in terms of a strategy that works very well. And it works well because the roundtables are specific to a certain topic, and that can engage certain people that are coming to the particular event. So anywhere you can create that approach or method or strategy, if you will, that can help them to connect with one another, that speaks to something that's of interest, that's where the success is going to be.
Absolutely. And so what kind of metrics or indicators do you prioritize to evaluate whether an event is successfully in embodying and promoting community principles?
Yes, it's interesting. I've thought about that because we're in a different space on how we measure now. Or I should say, yes, how we measure, but really it's how people are leveraging what's important to them. So I would say, it's really time to move beyond attendee count to really focusing on making every attendee count. So I say that in the way of it's meaningful engagement over numbers. And so what does that mean? It really means that, the traditional metrics like attendee count, how many attended a session, was the food good? What about the logistical capabilities? All of that, of course, is very, very important. We know that. But what really is going to speak to values and speak to success is, okay, well, did they have any meaningful engagement? What did that look like? How many business contacts did you make at the event? Or did you garner any business after this particular event. And I'm speaking mainly just because of the example that I previously gave, because it's of businesses that are going to this event to meet different people to help them in their companies to grow and to learn and to get opportunities. So I'm just using that as an example. But the questions can be something different that's specifically related to the value, the true meaningful connections that you were made and how that impacted what you do and how it helped you to do something different. Because if you are able to crack that nut with whatever you're doing in your organizations, that's going to continue to bring people back year after year because they know that they're going to get something from it. And that really helped to transform what they do. So the personalization, the meaningful nature as to why you or they are attending or why you want them to attend is what's really very, very important, which is why they have to be involved in the design process so that you can start out of the gate understanding how to reach them and making sure that your deliverables to them at the event meet exactly what they need.
Absolutely. So can you talk about any sort of big hurdles you faced in incorporating community values into an event and how overcoming that challenge or the changed your approach to event planning?
Well, as in all things, not everybody agrees with everything. So I think that friction can come. And I think that's probably the biggest aspect of, well, how on earth are you going to be all things to all people? Because that's what some people would think. It's like, okay, this community stuff, great, wonderful, but I don't like this. I don't want to do that. I don't, want to hear her and I don't want, or whatever the case is. So there's always going to be some friction to coming together in some way, shape, or form. But what I think is the best way to counter some of that or help to just buffer it a little bit is by communication. And why I say that is to be honest and open and to tell in your communications to the people that are coming that this is what we're doing because of why or whatever. This is how we're doing it. We heard you. We asked you, and this is what we've heard from what we asked you about. So you're actually putting it back then in their court that, we want to hear from you. Yes. We did hear from you. And this is what you ended up telling us. And so we understood that this is not across the board. This was the majority. And so we wanted to go in this way because this is what the majority of people shared. And so we know that there's always different ways that we can do things, and we will probably do things different next time. But that's why it's important to continue to hear from you. So I think the communications is what's going to help to drive that process and to help with the friction, because it's just, we're human. We're always going to have some sort of friction or conflict. We know that, but it's how it's leveraged and managed. I think that's really going to be most effective of whether you succeed or not.
And so, you sort of touch on the idea of not for everyone, or that there may be some resistance to that. So how are you ensuring that events are inclusive and welcoming to all? And do you have an inclusive practice, practicality that you can share with us?
Well, it is important for events to be inclusive. And I think that when you're seeking advice, meaning you're bringing your participants into the process, that should be a part of it. You know what I mean? You need a diverse group of perspectives to help you to understand how to lead. And so that's the largest thing that I think would be the foundational, is to ensure that the pool that you're talking to is representative of who you are as an organization, but it's representative in terms of a diverse perspectives. Like you think about neurodiversity. You've been hearing a lot about that. There are some people's brains that just work differently. So that means there may be some aspects of your planning that need to be incorporated specifically to that, whether it's maybe quiet rooms or maybe it's noise canceling headphones or whatever the case is. So you need to think in those ways, but you also need to think in the ways of how people not only learn, but in what ways that they learn and what is a way that would bring them there. Are there certain speakers that they want to hear? Are there certain concepts? So yes, it is inclusive, but it's in the way that you bring the people together to learn and hear from them as to what they want. And that's why I want to just underscore what I mentioned before in terms of the communications, because there will always be some who may just want to poke holes in certain things. And I get it. We're challenged. I think challenging is good in that sense. But I do think that it's important that, you do have different speakers that are there that represent, different demographics, different genders, different age groups, different generations, all of that. But I think the one common denominator in that, though, is that they all want something from this. It might be different, but they all do have to be represented in this as well, in the sense of how they learn, what they want, what their values are. So it's important to incorporate them from the get-go.
Absolutely. And so how do you think sustainable practices are playing a role in those event designs to support community principles? Like, are you hearing that a lot from your community, and how are you aligning that with those community values?
I think at this point that sustainability is important. Personally, that's my personal opinion. But I also feel that, and I see it, that sustainability right now, I think, are principles. And I see some incorporating them. Yes. Is it across the board? No, I don't see that. Do I think I think there might be various reasons for that. Maybe it's the staffing that they're not able to incorporate, or maybe it's leadership that is not quite on board totally with what it means and what they're going to have to do to ensure that it does happen. So I think it could be a lot of different reasons as to why that is. But I do not see it across the board. And so it's something that I do think has to be intentional. Just like the infusing community principles into events has to be intentional. It has to be intentional to find out what people's values are. It's going to take some time to talk with people, to survey them, to have focus groups, to poll them. It's intentional. And so I think sustainability is no different in the sense that it has to be intentional. And I just think that there are varying roadblocks that may prevent organizations as a whole to adopt some of the practices to achieve it.
Yeah, the example that I think of when we talk about this subject is the last COP 28 or 27 that happened in the Emirates. Anyway, where a lot of there was a lot of world leaders who were, for various security reasons or just logistical reasons, we're all traveling in private jets to get there.
Yes.
And
yes.
it's an
Yes.
example of where, a planning and logistics thing that well intended by whoever made those decisions doesn't quite align with the community's principles, right? And where we need to sort of pay attention and have some visibility on that.
Exactly, because that's a great example, because what it speaks to is being intentional. And I think sometimes too, and this is the last point I'll make on this particular one, because I think with sustainability, I think sometimes too, it can just be so broad and so big, in the sense of what it all means. And so that's why I think if you can start somewhere, maybe it's the food that you're planning for your events, and how you have the quantity of the foods and the type of foods. Maybe you can start somewhere. And then once you get that down, move on to another aspect of the event that can deal with another area of sustainability, just to help to make it less so, broad and what could seemingly be overwhelming. So
yeah, I think a lot of planners and organizers get overwhelmed with with the, and we'll pick on sustainability for a second here, because they think that they have to take their event from, what it is now to net negative millions.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I love that emphasis of, well, let's just start with this one and let's get that right. And then we can this can be a long-term intentional plan.
Yeah. And there's just such success in it. I tell my team all the time that, When you're faithful with the little, you'll be faithful with the much. So what do? You do what's in front of you right now, you do it, and you do it very well. And then when you do that very well, you'll move on to the next, and you do that, and you do that very well. So, you're trying to get to the bigger, but until you can get to the bigger, let's master the small, because we know that we're going to continue to the small is going to make up to the big. So we just may as well focus on what those small areas are, master them, become experts, and then we'll just one day find out that we're in the big already. So it's just to just not get overwhelmed by it, to manage it.
Yeah. What's the expression? Progress, not perfection, right?
Yes,
That's
exactly. Exactly.
So you've emphasized the importance of ongoing education for event
Yes,
professionals. I read
I
your
love it.
interview with Meeting Magazine about that. Where are the best places to seek out educational opportunities for event professionals today? Are there particular websites, podcasts for thought leaders you follow in particular lately?
Well, first of all, I love education. I just love it. It's just a part of what I do. And the industry organizations, I think, are good places to start for those that may not be as inclined to do a lot of education, because I think that they provide information that you would need in order to just have that deep thought about how to manage, how to lead, how to do different things. However, I get my information or education in different ways. And I just wanted to throw a couple of these out here because people might be like, what? And so I I feel as though you can learn from most to anything and anywhere. And let me just give you an example of that. For instance, museums, live shows like I went to go see recently, Andrea Bocelli. And that was just a masterful experience in the sense of what I was able to walk away with, and the feelings, the ballads and the images and the pictures and the transitions and all of that. So you think about that live show and those principles that were in that show, and how could those particular aspects be transformed to what you do on behalf of someone else? Another aspect is recently on my travels to Italy, I traveled all throughout the country for several weeks, and it was very much personalized, curated experiences. All of the areas that we went to, from Rome to the Amalfi Coast to Ravello to all of the different areas within Italy, and each of those particular aspects, I became a part of the culture. I learned the culture. I ate the culture. I was able to, be the culture while I was there. And, and on other travels too, to Africa and however, I did the same thing. And you don't have to go overseas to learn this. So let me just stop and say that. I'm only mentioning it because it's just, it's just in recent experiences. And so what I found from those, though, is the personalization, how it made me feel, and what I was able to walk away with, and what I learned from all of that, and the sense of about their culture and what made them who they are. That same personalization can be what you tie and build in your own events. So you think about the personalization of the people that are coming to your event. How can you transfer that feeling that you had on your own experiences and transfer that to your events that you have? So I think that I look beyond the, just the workshops and the sessions and the networking, little, the industry networking. It's important. I totally, I'm not knocking it at all. I do it. It's important. But it's just, I look beyond it because I feel as though the world is your oyster. When you can go to different situations and you can hear different topical areas and you can see different things, but you can connect the dots back to what you do to bring that same element into what you do and how you do it, and cause somebody else to have a different experience and feeling because of it.
That's excellent. So we like to wrap up these episodes with a practical tip for our listeners. So, thinking as an event organizer or planner that's listening to this episode, what's the first step you would ask them to do to start building that community principle into their event designs?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to think about your goals and objective for it. You have to know who you are, and your personas, who the people are that you serve. And so because the largest part of community is listening. And that's something in a very noisy world that's hard to do with all of our gadgets, all of our phones, all of the chatting, all of the, social media that sometimes I believe can be a little unsocial, not social, personal opinion, but it's just there's so much noise. So you've got to listen to people. And so you've got to be in the space to understand and to hear from them and be intentional about making the time and the effort to hear from them so that you truly can start that process of infusing those particular principles into your events. And, I do want to say too, we do have an event actually coming up on May 1st at the National Union Building in Washington, D.C. And this event is specifically teaching just that, how to infuse community principles into your events. And it's a number of different presenters that will speak on different case study areas of how they've done it. And there are some activations there as well. But it's a part of a larger construct that we developed within our company called Fuse, which is teaches just that. And we have workshops and events that are specifically based upon it because we believe in the power of who we are as event professionals. We are powerful people. We are transforming lives in terms of what we do and how we do it. And so that's the premise of it, is how can we continue to transform, engage, but also make these meaningful connections for people, because we really are the ones that know how to do it and can help to change the world through it. So I just, I can't say enough about the community principles and the power in it, and how people, if they truly spend the time to understand how to start the process and to stick with it and be intentional, they will be so successful in doing it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Jennifer. It was a great conversation. And
Thank you.
If anybody wants to reach out to you, where should they look for you?
They are welcome to go to our website, which is jdc-events.com. And I also want to just plug one more website, which is for fuse-events.com, if they want to find out more specifically about the community principles as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thanks, Matthew.
Production Value Matters, the business event podcast, is brought to you by Byrne Production Services. To find out more about Byrne Production Services and how putting on events can drive value for your business, visit byrneproductionservices.com. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Production Value Matters, thank you so much for listening.